What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Carlos, back for another episode of the Carlos Digital Show. A couple things to talk about today. I'd like to discuss an article from Variety in regards to the overhaul of DC Entertainment. And also, I will discuss what I think makes the best sense for the WBD company or system of production in regards to DC films. So we'll talk about that, and I'll give you my best ideas for some of the directions of what makes the most sense to me in regards to DC. So on to the Variety article. Variety came out with a rather interesting article with Brent Lang and Matt Donnelly on the 14th. They talk about, the article is kind of interesting, as it discusses what could be happening within DC Entertainment now that the merger has taken place and Warner Bros. Discovery is a thing. The article goes back and forth between sort of insider information and editorial information, so I think the nature of the article is convenient. I'll tell you why in a second. But the article overall, I don't doubt it's true to some degree. It's natural to think that there are changes happening inside. The article could be commissioned for someone inside WB trying to do something about it, but to get the information out there, but also to deflect. Walter Hamada, as you guys know, has been in the headlines, or at least in the news cycle recently, for having been questioned for about 3 hours in the Amber Heard versus Johnny Depp case. There is something happening there. I'm not really sure quite what it is, but Walter essentially presented the idea that he did not want to keep Amber Heard in Aquaman 2, and that she did not want to re-sign her and replace her because of quote-unquote chemistry issues with Jason Momoa. And then goes on to say that he was ultimately overruled by his superior executives. His direct superior is Toby Emmerich, so he would have been the person to do it. We know quite well that Toby Emmerich took credit for cutting Johnny Depp at the same time, so it was obviously him. What's the reasoning for that? Why is Walter just passing the buck directly? And why does this article exist? If you look from a sort of between the lines, it's possible that Walter Hamada is the person that commissioned this article, and he may be distancing himself from Toby Emmerich because changes are indeed happening, and something rather significant will come about that will require a figurehead, and perhaps Walter is trying to position himself as that figurehead. The article certainly mentions Walter Hamada as being someone successful. Please excuse me if I laugh at that. He has not been a good figure for DC Entertainment. He has not made money for DC Entertainment. He has made some really weak titles. With all due respect to everyone, obviously, everyone can enjoy whatever they feel that they want to enjoy. I'm not here to tell you that you can't enjoy what you want to enjoy, but I will tell you some things that, from my perspective, make sense or don't make sense. So Walter has not done a good job. And this article potentially takes away from the fact that he is part of legal proceeding in some way or another, and in a big way, because this is not someone quoting an email or talking about a text message or just asking for what he thought about being somewhere. He was actually questioned for 3 hours about the dealings of Amber Heard with WB. Something weird's happening there. I don't know exactly what it is, but for him to come up with an excuse to say he disagreed with his superiors indicates that there may have been something inappropriate there. So I guess we'll have to see, but that's done. So back to the article. The article talks about DC potentially being changed entirely. The DC is being seen as sort of not coherent, not unified, and essentially a reflection of not performing quite well. As you guys have known, the past 5 years, Walter Hamada and Toby Emmerich have taken over, the production of DC films, and they have made some real stinkers and some rather mediocre, low budget type of films, and the brand as a whole is not regarded as a high quality brand in my opinion, especially when you see that they are involved in a market that can make significant amount of money in the film industry. We're talking about billions of dollars. It's kind of hard to say that what they've done is a good job, or that they've done something representative of the kind of entertainment that the DC brand can provide the consumers. So the article essentially goes over, some details without an actual source, obviously. So this is why I think it's commissioned, but it is basically saying that that David Zaslav, the new Warner Brothers Discovery CEO, wants to unify DC under one banner. As you guys know, the DC is divided into there's DC Entertainment, which has the comics and the TV shows, but W Pictures Group takes care of the film part. So a lot of us have been calling for many years to follow a different structure, for DC to be something independent, because the studio interference has become a bit of a problem in terms of how they get involved in the editing room, and the kind of things that they request from the directors and from the people involved in the production becomes troublesome, because they're trying to always follow like some sort of formula to please a general audience, and that so far has not worked for them. So let's get two things straight here. One is, we have to agree on a couple of things. One is, DC has not done well under these people. Number two, this attempt to try to mimic Disney in some way. They've said that they don't do that, but in my opinion, they have, but in the sort of least intelligent way, trying to just kind of do these sort of, crowd-pleasing films that, never really landed with anyone, and they were kind of like really low quality in terms of, all the expenses, from the talent to, I guess let's call it the production values of the films. They're not that good, and they have not made any type of an impact. So then Zaslav, probably seeing this, not too impressed with what they're producing, and it says here in the article that he potentially is looking at unifying all branches of DC under one umbrella, and that there may be a sort of Kevin Feige type of figure to run everything, and that they're looking maybe more of someone with a business acumen as opposed to a creative to run it straight up. So talks about Emma Watts being a potential candidate for this, that will likely not take the job. So this is kind of the idea of who they're looking for. So they may not be thinking of specifically a Kevin Feige in the direct sense of how he works with Marvel, where he controls absolutely everything. They may be looking at someone that can at least unify the brands and get them to work in synergy. If there is something that's clear to me, is the DC brand over the past 5 years, or maybe even a little bit more than that, is not a unit that's worked cohesively as a business, because of the way that the business is structured, because the way things have been, set up. This is not really working in a way that, in my opinion, anyways, maximizes the capabilities of the brand and the capabilities of the company. I think that essentially, if you look at DC as a whole, you see a very fractured brand. It's not something that takes advantage of everything that it has, at its disposal. Every unit is working independently. DC Entertainment has also been a bit of a chaotic unit up until the departure of Diane Nelson and Jeff Johns. Those guys were on a rampage back in the day, trying to basically do more or less what they're saying that has to get done here in terms of obtaining everything unified, because back then they were interested in the film production part, because film is, out of all the three branches, if you consider comic books, television, films, and video games, obviously film is the one that brings the most money by far. So it's they were trying to do that back then, and it does sort of make some sense to me, especially if you're protecting the product. You are allowing the directors and the people with true vision to do the product that they want to make, and bring it out there. That's a positive for fans. So the DC brand right now, as you see it, in the way that it's divided right now, you have to look at what each one of them, each division is doing. The film division, obviously, a giant mess. You can say that quite possibly DC films have not made a lot of money, if any money. I don't think they have made any money considering the losses that they've accumulated the past maybe 2 years or so. I don't think they've made any money. When you have things like the Suicide Squad coming in, films that have made money, like the Joker or Aquaman, especially the Joker, their business dealings have ensured that they don't basically bring about profits. And in the article, they mentioned Todd Phillips' Joker as a good idea of a film, to proceed. That you take not Joker is pretty big, but maybe not like a forefront type of character, and you take this movie and you make it with a good budget, and you get the attention of people, and then you make all this money as one success story for them. As a reference of what can be done with the brand, then it's a positive. I agree, but the current owner, the current management team, they have not been able to capitalize on that. They actually did not want this movie to be made, and they basically shared investment, the investment of this film with other companies because they did not want to fund it themselves. They did not believe in this type of film. So the Joker is a good example of how unfit these people are, to run this business. So, so the film part is not doing good. The brand is seen as a cheap version of the Marvel brand at the moment. Nothing that they're coming out with is something that can get people truly excited. It's the productions have been cheap. They cannot produce at a regular pace. Nothing is. There's no connectivity. There's all these narratives about we're doing our own thing, and we can, shared universes don't work for us, or, directors who have their own take doesn't really work for us. We're going to work with smaller directors. All these narratives, they keep changing, but the end result is that the brand has eroded, and nothing that they do right now is getting people excited, and you have to do no further than to look at what happened with the Batman. The Batman is struggling at 740 million or so. This is the Batman with no competition and all the support of the studio. Like, the marketing budget was gigantic for this movie, and yet it fails to get people excited. So there is a problem on the film side, and you don't have to look too far. You can see basically that at the same time you are coming up short despite your best efforts with performing out there and getting people excited. And at the same time, you have this gigantic footprint on social media telling you, look, this is what I want, this is what I want. So you can see very clearly the disconnect there, and I truly hope that Warner Bros. Discovery and David Hasselhoff and whomever is coming in to take a look at what's happening, and whomever is giving them advice as consultants, that they can tell them, that the discrepancy can be any more clear. The customers want something, and the producers are doing something else. So I've always felt that the film division has always treated the fans as an obstacle towards a mainstream success, and at the same time, the studio has forgotten about what their identity has been in the past as a legacy studio, as a studio that has brought, for the time frame, big name productions. If you look back at, Superman, from 1979, big names, Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, big budgets. You go into the 90s, Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson, Tim Burton, Chris Nolan, Zack Snyder. I could go on, naming names, and telling you that this is the core of DC in films. They have a place there, and they have an identity, and they've diverted from that identity, and they don't have a differentiator in the market. So the film division is very weak, needs big change. It's incredible that their biggest success over the past couple of years, in my opinion, Zack Snyder's Justice League, is something that they not, that they suppressed. So very, very, very sad to see the condition that's in. But then let's look at the even bigger picture. Let's move on to the television side of things. The television part of it has been exclusively CW shows. The CW is a network that has a very limited audience. They focus on young adults, essentially, and it's been discovered that that TV station does not make any profit. So there's questionable, finances there, and whether this is making a whole lot of sense or not. It's possible those shows are actually making that much money either. Some people say that their streaming agreements is what makes them the money, but I'm not so sure how successful that venture actually is, and when it's potentially. You can conclude that people like Greg Berlanti and Jeff Johns are pocketing quite a bit of money there, and a lot of these projects are based on Jeff Johns' takes, and they fail to reach the audience. I think it's a waste, essentially, to put so many characters that should be top tier, that should be treated with high budgets, that should be presented to the public as epic and classic characters that come from eras that have but that are quite different from ours, but that these characters have endured all these decades, and they need to be treated with respect. Like if you treat them as legacy characters and characters that deserve these budgets, then what's happening here is you have these like shows with like so much melodrama, and they just I understand if you enjoy them, but the reality is that they are cheapening the brand, and they're making it seem as quick, disposable entertainment that shouldn't be taken seriously. So I do think CW is hurting the brand at the moment. And when you compare it to what Disney, for example, is doing, it's not even close. They're looking at, a model that is not in sync with the films, and that is not creating any type of excitement because of the synergy between one and the other. I think that obviously they may want to, their big idea seems to be that they wanted to cross over CW with the DCU, which I think it's kind of lame. You have guys like Grant Justin, hiring, film agents and spending big money to be represented for film contracts, but I don't think that's the way to go. That doesn't get more than just a few people excited. The CW, maybe it's running its course. The Arrow, the TV show's been canceled. The Flash seems to be ending soon. The Superman and Lois and Superman TV show. It's obviously a little bit higher budget than the other ones, but it has no cultural impact. So that network is, at this point, I'm thinking it's a mistake, and they should basically move on from that. And then you move to comic books. The comic books is obviously an industry that is despite the success of the films and despite the mass appeal and the reach of all this IP, the comic books as a business, they're suffering. So I blame the executives that run these businesses, from Disney and from Warner Brothers, that they're not doing enough to promote comic books as a business. So it's a shame, really, that there's no synergy there. But there's something that DC could do with this. So in the same way that I feel that there could be connectivity between movies and TV, there should be connectivity between movies and comics. And then you go into the video game, realm. DC doesn't do that many video games, other than the Arkham Knight series and potentially the Suicide Squad, game that's about to come out. There isn't like a whole lot. And if you look at the spectrum of movies, film, comics, it's still the same people that play these things. And if you give people a good, RPG or a good, massive scale game, people will spend the money on that. So what I'm trying to say here essentially is that you have all these branches and they are completely disconnected, and they're not working in unison, and they're not complementing one another, and they're not basically getting absolutely anyone excited for any of these products. And sure, there may be some people online that say, yeah, I love this, I like it. Everyone has an opinion, but as a whole, as a big picture, I don't think they're operating in the best way possible. So this article is essentially saying that you want, or that David Zaslav at least wants to go in the direction where everything is integrated under one business person that has maybe some film experience, because that's sort of what it's implying, to run this whole thing. So in terms of candidates, apparently Emma Watts was one of them, but she won't be taking the job. There's other people have been mentioned before, like Scott Stover from Netflix. who would be a good person to take on that job. There's other people too that could do it and do it quite well. One person I would absolutely love to take that kind of job, and I think would be an absolutely amazing person for it. That would bring this kind of synergy and calming presence between all these different divisions. That would be Deborah Snyder, who definitely has the acumen and the experience to be able to do this, and the understanding of the properties and the history, obviously, with the studio. So she would know how this works. So she would be one person. Another guy like Charles Roven, I know he's engaged with other business ventures, so he may not be the right person. But I think I agree that this has to be a business-oriented person that has some sort of film experience, but it would be someone that can get all branches to work cohesively, which is something that is desperately lacking. As long as we understand, and this applies for pretty much everything I'm talking about here, as long as DC, or at least Warner Brothers Discovery, understands that you cannot, to compete, you cannot at this moment in time. Disney is far gone from where you are right now, and you're not going to catch up by just trying to pretend that you can do the exact same as they do, by just basically trying to do whatever, and then you catch up. You have to understand two things. Warner Bros. Discovery is not Disney. Disney is a gigantic corporation with big pockets and gigantic reach and brand recognition. The Marvel brand has gathered all this momentum throughout the years. So if you have a unified front that has realistic expectations, where if a film does not hit 1 billion, and if it gives you, whatever the amount is, and you have enough profit, and that's enough to keep going, and you don't care about what these like talking heads online are saying, you will be successful. So you have to basically set a course and be very confident in it. So in my opinion, I feel that you really need to have an understanding for what you can do, and if you want to compete, if you want to be a player in this big market and make some money, then you have to obviously take everything that's at your disposal to compete. So if you want to compete, you have to be ready to put an effort, and what they're doing is not putting a real effort. They're just trying to mold things to benefit the agendas of certain people, and things are not going well. So when I see this article, yeah, sure, it could be Walter Hamada trying to position himself as the person to do this job, and maybe divorcing a little bit from Toby Emmerich, who may be on the way out. But I get two things from this article. One is Toby Emmerich is on his way to losing DC completely. If you say that the DC Films is under the DC Entertainment umbrella, then they produce their own films, and potentially, maybe the Warner Bros. Pictures Group has to give resources to be able to produce this. But this sort of green light, thing, it's independent, and Toby Emmerich may not have anything to do with that. So that's a positive to me already, because to me, this is the worst executive in Hollywood at the moment. So if you can remove that and give people, the creatives, the space to do what they need to do without basically all this politics and all these like agendas, then it's a good thing. And another positive I get from this article is that there is an acknowledgement that things are not working right now the way that they are. You have all these like films that are just not not doing so well. So it's just nothing that would be interesting. So going back to the point of the different branches, you have films not doing great, TV in a way damaging the brand, comic books, they're hurting, but they could use some help, but it's still something that does bring some degree of profit. And then you have video games. So you do have everything, but there's one more thing that you have to keep in mind that they have. Warner Bros. Discovery has the whole brand at their disposal. They have all the characters, they have all the rights, and this was a case before. And you can see that Disney and Sony are starting to have a slugfest a little bit over Spider-Man once again, and so that you don't have that problem. The problem is more internal in the way that things have been divided. So looking at this article and seeing that they want to make a change, it may not mean the return of the Snyderverse. It may mean it. I guess we'll have to see, and I'll make a point, in the next section as to why it makes sense. But at the very least, we're starting to see a change that acknowledges that something has not been working, that this is not what you do with a brand like this. And when Discovery bought this, they brought it to do something with it. And what's happening right now, I see two things. One is obviously this article saying something needs to change. And I also see obviously David Zaslav coming out saying that accountability is going to be a thing in this company. So why would he say that at this point in time when the merger is done? Is because the people are not safe, because changes will continue to come. And this is what I've been saying all along. Just because something didn't happen exactly how you wanted it at the moment that you wanted it, doesn't mean it's actually not going to happen. So to me, keep making your noise, obviously, because right now is the time to start saying, yeah, this is what we want. And, you have to let their research come to a conclusion. And what are the sources of that research? Social media. So, it doesn't matter if, someone will tell you, that the hashtag doesn't do anything anymore, or, all this effort that you're putting doesn't make it, or you have some bloggers like saying, it doesn't work. DC has to take their own path and decide where they want to go and just basically stick with it and ignore the talking heads online, whether it's bloggers or, these fans that claim to be real DC fans that aren't really fans. You have to put these people behind it. You have to do whatever you can the best way that you can, and things will be built from there. So you need a good strategy moving forward, which is what I will talk about next. But I feel that this article is a positive. I feel there's change is most definitely coming, and we're starting to see things come through. So it's a matter of time before we find out exactly where things are going to go. I hope to make the right decision. I'm starting to see that there may be some intelligence behind this whole thing. Let's discuss in my next segment where I think things could go. All right, guys, so for the next segment, let's discuss where I think things should go. Doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen, but if they are smart, they should make it happen. They should make it go that direction. So if you look back over the past 5 years or so, when you have movies like Harley Quinn, Shazam, The Suicide Squad, The Batman, these are movies that at the end of the day have struggled to get wide acceptance. So the plan that they had are not really working out. Everything is a bit of a mess. Everything is built as a sort of a cheap thing, and you have all the fans online saying, "Help me! I want you to give you my money." The problem here is that their most successful projects are being ignored, are being suppressed over the past 5 years for personal agendas. I'm pretty sure, because it doesn't make sense to not continue to invest. One of the biggest problems that Warner Bros. Has right now is that they have not completed something that they promised all the way back in 2012, which was a major shared universe for the DC characters. You have Man of Steel, BVS, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and maybe even to some degree the first Wonder Woman film, but overall, beyond that era, and I'm basically kind of tossing Justice League there, even though it was victim of major studio interference. What has happened since then has not been very positive for the brand and for the productivity and for the brand recognition. It has not worked out quite well, because you have now something that, despite of your efforts, is not really performing. So where do we go from here? What could they do? I think that we have to recognize a couple of things. That if they want to come in and make money and make good use of that property and prove to your investors that you make the right choice, you can't sit back there and say, you know what, wipe everything clean, start fresh, we'll figure out how it goes, and then you have to basically start over again when you have things that are at your disposal. So a lot of people might be thinking that a reboot might be the best way to go about it. I personally disagree with that, because it wastes a lot of investment, and a lot of things are already established that can be put to good use. Things like the actors. So you have Jason Momoa, Gal Gadot, Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, Ray Fisher, Ezra Miller. All these guys are recognized in the public now as these characters. I dare you, go and ask someone that knows very little about this stuff, and you show them a picture of Henry Cavill, and you ask them, who is this guy? They will say it's Superman. That kind of recognition costs money, costs time, and the acceptance is already there for these characters. So to put that aside and not do anything with it it's kind of ridiculous. And in this same report I was talking about in the previous section, they say that they feel that these characters have been kind of like left, I can't remember what the terminology is, but almost left there to erode and dry. Well, Superman, Man of Steel, 2013, and we're almost 2022, or we are in 2022. So why hasn't there been a sequel? I understand that there was a main storyline that was going to be done on the Justice League movies. Doesn't mean you could have done something else with Superman in the meantime, especially if you kind of were blocking these movies. So one big problem that they have is that for some time they were trying to portray the audience as kind of dumb, and that they could make changes, and that everything could be shifted, and the storyline could continue. But the truth is here is that we started something with Zack Snyder in 2012, and they've not allowed it to grow in the way that they promised they were going to take it. So that part has been frustrating for the fans, and you have some people who are dead set and wanted to see that continue because it has been of high quality. So what I think they have to consider is that in order to maximize and be successful and go on about competing, we're not talking about just putting minimal effort. If you want to compete, you have to get all hands on deck. And what I mean by that is you have to take your best characters, take your best options, bring all your fans together, and put the best product you can put out there. None of it's like cheap stuff. None of it's like generic, crap. I understand you guys may like, things like Shazam and stuff like that, but that stuff is not what drives people to film. Big names, big films is the differentiator. That is the image that the studio has had for years, and that's what a lot of people want to see. A lot of people want to see Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder is a person that is synonymous with the DC brand at this point. Whether you like him or don't like him, the majority of people can get behind it. You can see it when HBO Max was behind Zack and he did all these videos to promote Zack Snyder's Justice League. You can see online the turn to being like super pro Zack Snyder. So it's a lot of people will dance to whatever tune the studio is singing. So that's not a problem to me. This sort of image and narratives and darkness, that's not relevant. If you have a studio that puts big money down to support a project, people will go to see it. So the thing is, over the years, the fandoms has exploded online. When you see this Restore the Snyderverse like hashtag events, they're very different now than they were 2 years ago. Right now, 2 years ago, I was very involved with this, trying to put in as many tweets as I could, like basically doing push-ups for an entire day to make a trend. We made it happen, and then the thing blew up. Right now, it's far easier. Right now, this thing, with very little effort, I can see it trending already. So that is only indicative of a fan base that has grown. So that's aspect number one. You have the fans. You have a large marketing army ready to help you produce or to promote at least something. So you have that at your disposal. You have a brand recognition. You have a brand identity as the sort of this epic scale, high production, epic scores, big names type of thing. You have a super recognizable name in Zack Snyder. You have other assets. You have, Matt Reeves and Patty Jenkins could potentially help as well. You have David Ayer, who is loved by the fans. So you do have things to play with. So why start with something that, sure, it might get some people online excited, but it may just continue to fracture the fan base and remove support from one main project that would be successful. So all this multiverse talk is just talk, in my opinion, but it's just some abstract term to play with geeks' emotions. But at the end of the day, there's two things you have to consider. One, cash is finite. Not every single project can be funded, but at the same time, I think a shared universe is most definitely a way to go about it. So you already have a framework with the Zack Snyder stuff. Starting from the beginning means lower returns. Right now, you continue the Justice League storyline. There is interest and there is introduction to the general audience for it already, so you most definitely should do it. I think that if it was up to me, I would do. You have to look at it from different perspectives. You have at your disposal the fans. The fans, they made it to the Oscars in the most legitimate possible way. So they're a force that can help you. You need to give them something to do. You need to give them viral marketing campaigns. You need to create a hype, generating, event that will expand over maybe 2 weeks before a release of a film. If you look back when we were celebrating the first year of Zack Snyder's Justice League, of the Justice League film release, asking to release the Snyder Cut, Ben Affleck came out and Gal Gadot came out, and that made it explode. And that day I think we reached like 1.5 million tweets. So you can do something. If you create a viral campaign for the fans, it might be fun. I would love to see, stuff like we had before, like the Lex OS website, or something that has tricks and games to keep people engaged and interested. There was when The Dark Knight came out, there was this like incredible viral campaign where people had to play games, and at some point people were receiving cakes in the mail, and there was inside the cake there was a cell phone that asked you to call a number, and when you called the number, it was Heath Ledger, a voice recorded message of Heath Ledger as a Joker giving you the next hint. These kind of things create excitement, they create interest, and they might have some sort of expense, but they're kind of fun, and they might be a bit of a way to keep the fans, entertained and and engaged. So you need a social marketing strategy. I can tell you right now that if you spend more money on social marketing than on billboards and advertisements, you get a greater reach, and you have the fans there to help you do that. So you cannot ignore that, because that is something that is there for the taking, and it's available to you. Let that go to waste is a major mistake. So I hope they recognize that. In terms of the universe, you can do the Zack Snyder stuff. If I was WBD, I would ask him to come and give some assessment as to what you can do with the films that are on pause right now, and how you can move forward to create this like sort of shared universe. So if I go for it, the whole 9 yards. I bring the universe back in full. I think that you need expensive movies, bombastic movies, but you have other things at your disposal as well to do that. You have channels like TNT, you have HBO Max. I'm not really sure if Warner Brothers produces any TV shows for the main broadcasting stations, so may not be completely available. But you need a strategy where you can use this shared universe, and you can provide essentially, let's say, a sort of cohesive strategy where you're using all of these factors that you have to hype up a major theatrical release. Theatricals where the money's at, so you have to use the other things. You have to use the comics, TV shows, and your streaming services to promote and to get there. So what I would do is continue with the Justice League stuff. I would maybe modify it a little bit so it doesn't end immediately, or maybe change the storyline so that you can branch out into other things. Obviously, Zack Snyder Justice League did branch out into multiple universes, or multiple sort of sub-contained, pockets of the DC universe, like the Amazons and Wonder Woman, and Aquaman with the Atlanteans, etc., etc. So you can do more of that. You can expand into that. You need all the films to have a similar, tone. Get rid of all this like jokey stuff and all these like sort of what they think is crowd-pleasing stuff, and just stick to something more unified. It doesn't mean that a movie cannot have a lighter tone than another, but don't go so far with like the sort of goofy stuff that you get to see on Aquaman, or you see on Shazam and stuff like that. Make your production values high. What I would love to do is to have a model in which, look at what Disney's doing. Disney is not taking the TV shows as something separate from your shared universe. They are contained, but they do happen in that universe, and you give people content in that way. So what I would love to do is to have a strategy where you use the streaming films or the streaming series or the streaming specials as a way to ramp up your theatrical film. So what I would do potentially is create some Justice League content to release on HBO Max that leads to potentially some Justice League content that leads to some sort of special on TNT, for example. And then you basically drop your theatrical. That way you create this hype and this excitement from different channels to go and see that. So, when the original Justice League came out, on HBO Max, I felt like, well, it'd be cool if you release like the first 3 chapters and then the whole thing ends up being released in the theatrical, and then maybe a month later you have the whole thing on HBO Max. So you could do something where you make use of one to hype up the other, and then you end up in in a major explosion at the end with a big theatrical release that everyone wants to see. So whatever you do on TNT on cable, and whatever you do on streaming, has to end in a big cliffhanger that will make people want to go and see the film. In terms of projects, obviously the Justice League series has to be the main core series. You can continue to do things like, you could take, for example, the Wonder Woman franchise. I mean, Patty will continue to do Wonder Woman 3. I hope they go back to what the first Wonder Woman film was like. I would basically bring Alan Heinberg, I think was the writer for the first film. I would absolutely bring him back, and just try to get back that same tone, and just forget that, Wonder Woman 84 happened. I mean, they happened, but just, you can treat some things as if they're not really canon. They're just self-contained, and that should be fine. I would also do Wonder Woman 1854 as a streaming special, maybe, a 1.5 hour special movie for more adult audiences, I guess, on HBO Max. It could be self-contained, not within continuity, but you could do something like that. Or you could find a way to put it within continuity to connect it even more. The world of comics, you can basically twist the storyline or create a pocket of time and space where, Elseworlds things can happen. So that's another option. You can create Elseworld series for HBO Max. You have franchises like Aquaman. I don't think they're making the best use of James Wan by bringing all this like comedy into it, but we'll see what happens with Aquaman 2. But that's also like a big franchise that they could expand upon. I don't agree with all these like cartoons that they did and this Aqualad thing that's coming out. I'm not really sure what that's all about, but you have all these franchises that you can do something with. You can bring an Atom movie, but still, you most definitely should do a Cyborg movie still. The Flash needs to be reworked in some way to fit like a wider universe. You will need, you could do other projects of, that are separate from the continuity, but they should not be these cheap, like super cheap things. No one's really getting excited about all these big characters. So you focus on what you have, and you do have something. And then when you talk about the comic books, then the comic books should be aligned to whatever film releases are happening. There should be comic books that tell further parts of the story that complement these movies, and they should be coming out at the same time that these movies come out, or leading up to the ramp up to these movies. And then video games. So video games is like an interesting thing, because Warner's has video game divisions within their company, so there should not be a huge problem with actor likenesses. So you have all the rights to all the characters, and you should be able to basically use the likeness of the characters into your video games. So there is no problem there. Just pay the actors. Pay Henry. He's a recognizable name in a multi-billion-dollar market. Pay the guy. Pay everyone. Make high production films. Bring Zack Snyder. Do this, and then on top of that, you can also offer other things on the side. That may not be the main course, but that they're still of interest, and that people will most definitely pay to see. Stuff like the Batman from Matt Reeves, or the Joker from Todd Phillips. You can do those kinds of things as complementary. So, for things to move forward for DC, you need to understand one thing. Unless you allow Zack Snyder to have his space and his time on the main stage when he has to, you're not going to get everyone unified and everyone supporting all the products at the same time. This thing has developed over the past few years, and the injustices that have been done to him as a person by the studio, or to guys like Ray Fisher, it just fuels this even more. So you're never going to be able to move forward unless you allow this to continue and potentially finish, or you allow it to expand to wherever it has to expand. So you definitely need that to be able to continue. That doesn't mean that you cannot have other things that could basically be self-contained and mini universes, pocket universes, if you want to call them that. You can have that. There is no problem at all, and you may be able to strike gold with some of them. But you definitely need to be able to put all this together to have an potentially interesting strategy. You could, even take something like Shazam, who I disagree with the tone that they're going for this as well. I think that Shazam should have been done as a dark magic epic movie, kind of like the Harry Potter films of, the later Harry Potter films. So, you know, all these things require money, they require planning, they require time. But if you're looking at strategy, you look no further than someone like Zack Snyder, who had, major hype. He knows how to hype the projects. He knows how to talk to the fans. He knows how to talk the language, and he has credibility within the fans, within a fan base that has great potential for marketing capabilities. So all the aspects, all the contents, all the ingredients are there for them to do something. But it's up to Warner Brothers to decide what they want to do. The smartest thing to do is to take everything that you have, all hands on deck is what I'm going to call this, and move forward so you can be successful. And I know they can, and I know that they will if they make the right choices. So it's really up to them, but at the same time, there's no guarantees that that's exactly what's going to happen. So it is important for you to keep making noise, because I'm not saying that that's just going to keep the pressure going, but it's going to at least keep things honest, and they need to know, the research needs to say that this is what people are asking for, and they certainly are. So ignore the talking heads, ignore the bloggers, force people to write positive things, and give your support where your support is needed. So I think this is positive. There are hints from Zack Snyder that it potentially could be theatrical release for Zack Snyder Justice League. It's an amazing thing to go about. Maybe things are moving in that direction. I hope that they are, because he is the right guy to do these things. So there's so many projects and so many things that you can do to move forward, that this is, if you remove the back components that have held the brand back over the last couple of years, you could have something special here. And as long as the right expectations are set, and as long as the people that work can do what they do best, and you can consider that you have all these things in your basket, all you have to do is just execute. If you want to run the marathon and you want to compete against someone else, you gotta be ready. You gotta be prepared to come in and start running. So don't let distractions get in your way. Don't let the opinions of people who don't want you to succeed get in your way, and just do the right thing. I understand that, some people say like, oh no, it cannot be that way. Look, Zack Snyder is the kind of guy that, he's not a bland director, and he takes things sometimes some ways that are unexpected. And some people take that to basically say, no, this whole like dark and light narrative, which is kind of like funny at this day and age. You can divert from, the comics in some way, or you can divert from basic concepts in a way, because this is movies. This is not just the comics. And, you have a movie like No Way Home where, Aunt May is the one that dies, and nobody has a problem with that. So you have to understand that you don't have to listen to these people online that try to hang on to whatever argument they can to say this cannot be. I'm here to tell you that yes, it can be, and all you need is the studio support. And take the reference as what I said earlier, the HBO Max 15 minutes that they gave to Zack Snyder to basically promote this movie, that little bit of time where they were with him to promote, the discourse online was completely different than you've ever seen, basically. So all we need is studio support. The studio needs the fans to be with them, the subject matter experts that ultimately will give their approval, and they will help you promote it. You have to give the fans something. You have to work in synergy with the market and with your available tools like your comics, video games, TV stations, streaming services. And you have to go, and you can't ignore the actors and the hype that has been building up. You have to take advantage of this. So I think, as always, restore the Snyderverse, give people what they want, and the results will be, substantial and most definitely profitable for Warner Bros. Discovery. So I look forward to see what happens here. We'll continue to talk about this kind of strategy in a future episode. But for my next episode, I would like to review Matt Reeves' The Batman. I haven't seen it yet, but I hope to see it soon. And then after that, or maybe even before that, Rebel Moon is about to start filming. So I will do a special, and I will talk about all the relevant factors like the actors and who's doing what in this. But that's all I have for now, guys. So appreciate your time and your support. Lots of good feedback from you upon my return to podcasting. So I will keep this up. So thank you so much, and We'll catch you later. Thanks.